And in our community, the only adequate, I guess, viable organization would be the church. I still believe that the church in the black community could do more than they're doing in terms of this. In our city, the church is really waking up to that, and I think a lot of things are happening. That's what Dr. Isabel was about in that program that he was looking at.
Very good. And Doctor, I think in terms of talking about some of the causes and what some of the other organizations are doing, how do we compare Tennessee with perhaps some of the other states in the South as well as outside of the South? Is this a national problem, and are we simply just overwhelmed nationally, or what?
There are some states that's worse than this state. Where I started doing this work was Michigan. And Michigan and some of the northeastern states, crime and what was happening to the young black male was much worse than what's going on here. But we're catching up. I was looking at homicide in Michigan and in Detroit, and the statistics were showing that 1 in 4 young black male would get killed. When they die, if they died, it would be from getting killed. Tennessee is a little bit behind most of the states in terms of crime, but they are catching up rapidly. So I don't think we are that far behind to say that we can rest assured.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I think you will recall that not long ago, Tennessee ranked homicide as the 6th leading cause of death among young black males.
Right. In Memphis, one year, I think it was '88, Memphis were one of those leading cities in homicide. Nashville and Memphis and Chattanooga and Knoxville are high in the homicide rate. And as drugs move into this state, and this is a place where the drug people seem to think they can come, we'll see homicide and crime get higher. And I don't think we should leave it to the criminal justice system alone to try to handle it. This is not a criminal justice system problem. As a matter of fact, the Surgeon General talked about homicide being a health problem, a public health problem. Anything that kills you
public
be
health.
a public health problem. So I think that, well, another thing that happened in the state of Tennessee, the governor and the legislators appropriated, I think last year, year before last, over $1 million to look at homicide and violent behavior in Tennessee. Now, you're aware of the Men of Distinction program. That's where that money came from. Black legislators were concerned with violence amongst young black men, so they appropriated that money for that.
Let me interrupt you there, Doctor, because we've heard quite a bit of this, of the Men of Distinction programs. And I say programs because not only is it a program here, but I think it sort of has a sort of a national connection. And you're also intimately involved with that program. Why don't you give us some information about your connection with it and perhaps some information about the program, period, because I think that that does represent at least one method whereby we might be able to deal with it in the community.
Well, let me give you a little history of that, because when I did the study on black men and homicide and their life expectancy, I looked at the life expectancy of black men, and their life expectancy is shorter than any other major group in the United States. And I was trying to find out the reason for that. Of course, homicide was one of the major reasons for that. Not only a low life expectancy, but it was a declining life expectancy in a time when everybody else's life expectancy is increasing. I looked at men who were in jail for homicide, young men who were going to Hubbard Hospital and General Hospital for acts of aggression, assault, and I thought at that time a good place to intervene was the emergency room men, to get these men who are coming into emergency room being cut and shot and fighting and eventually getting killed, and studying these men and find out what it is. And we attempted to do that at Meharry for a while. Then we determined that we should get to these men earlier than that. If we could get to them when they were younger, we could probably change the behavior before it got to where it was.
The emergency room.
So we had determined that getting to them at about 8 and 9 years old, and that's what the Men of Distinction program is doing. By the way, the Urban League has a program called Children of the Sun. They're doing the same thing. And they modeled these programs after programs across the country that the Urban League has, programs across the country where they're trying to look into the behavior of young black men and reduce crime and violence amongst them. So that's how we got involved in the Men of Distinction. They are doing a lot of things. They're trying to change the behavior of these children so they will not go into crime and violence later in life. I'm evaluating that program at the Men of Distinction, and they're doing great work. I looked at some behaviors that we were trying to, we call them precursory behaviors, that we were trying to affect. We wanted to look at things like how they were doing in school, like dropouts and attendance and academia. And we were looking at things like crime, what kind of crime they may be involved in, how they got along with at home, were they fighting and things like that. And I did a pretest on those children, the Men of Distinction, when they first came into the program. They have been in the program a year now, and I've done a post-test. And we see substantial, significant change in the behaviors of the Men of Distinction. And that's what they were trying to do. I think this program is saying that if we can do this with young black male and affect what we call precursory behaviors, behaviors that happens before violence, we can probably use this model program across the country. So the Men of Distinction program is very effective. We're looking at self-concept and those young men, and it's something that doesn't happen in school. So what we were suggesting that we may have to come up with a different program for certain numbers of our children that the school and the family and the church and all these people are missing. We talked about if that program, Dr. Isabel program, probably a new institution that would catch the young men that are falling through the crack, and that would change this behavior.
Very good. Very good. Doctor, I think in terms of looking at this as a problem and a question, would you say that in terms of the financial resources that were put in that Men of Distinction program across the state, do you think that the state got its money's worth out of that?
More than their money. When I was looking at the emergency room group that came to General, those same young men were coming into General over and over again. A substantial percent of the emergency room population was either these men or the result of what they had done. They were going themselves, but sometimes they were sending other people,
folks,
their wives, their children. So right along that line, it was cost effective. And when they go to jail, it costs